SOS to ROS. And you're going to kind of take us down this journey, this alphabetical journey, and explain to us what an ROS is. It is what?
Well, it's the battle of the acronyms, right? That's what we're going after right now.
It seems that way, yeah.
So it really is talking about your operating system, and primarily we're calling it the responsive operating system, ROS. And I like our hook. It's, your business has one critical operating system you can update without IT, which is nice, right? I don't have to give, I have to put in a ticket to have someone come in and look at my operating system update. It's something you as a leader can actually do within your business.
I like it. So dummy it down for us Mavericks. What is a responsive operating system? There's a lot of syllables tied in there.
Yes.
So boil it down for us.
Yeah. So, we've been talking over, our first few episodes about some of the hidden things within the business. Your strategy, value streams, those kinds of things. So an operating system, and this is where you and I have talked about, we can go into a business and there's a lot of similarities. There's things we can look at and say, okay, there's our operating system. So your strategy and how you execute the strategy is part of that operating system. The process and procedures that you have in place, whether they're documented or not, right? They're there. Right. And so what we want to do is start to give those some more visibility. Performance management, again, whether it's formal or not, whether you have a 4-inch binder from HR, those things are in place. Roles and responsibilities, again, job descriptions, whether it's written down or not, you have your team operating in a specific way. So when you take the sum total of all those things, that's your operating system. What we want to talk about is a responsive operating system where we're being very intentional, one, about documenting all those pieces of that, and then intentionally going in and creating what we want it to look like. So what happens over time is businesses just develop and morph these things, again, documented or not, they sort of land on, this is our operating system. And what we're saying is, that's great. Let's document that first, then let's start to go in and start to make changes to the operating system. So your SOS that you talked about last week, Brian, is doing that. It's coming in with a very specific framework and saying, I can go in and I can start to look at your strategy and how you execute it. I can look at optimization and stabilization. So what you're doing is prescribing a way to go after your operating system and improve it. So the SOS was your quick, I would call sort of your quick start method to get in, start making changes very quickly. So what's great is, whether it's a framework or tools we'll talk about, if you've better defined and formalized the system, then when you bring something like yours in, the SOS or other tools, we know exactly what we're tinkering with, what we're experimenting with, or using for a proving ground, and then we can document and say, here's what I think is going to happen when I make that change.
Yeah.
So the responsiveness is, one is intentionally executing your strategy, but then the more responsive your operating system, the better the system can take impact from changes in the market, changes in product offerings or services, those kinds of things. And the system can respond to it versus almost like rejecting it, right? It was like, we can't do that, or you're overwhelmed. The idea is to make it more responsive so it's more resilient.
Right. And I like what you said was making it more intentional, because the fact of the matter is, we all have an implied operating system going on. We all do. It whether it's personal or whether it's with the business, it already exists. And I think a lot of the fears that small business owners have is, oh, wow, I have to create this operating system from zero. No, you don't. What we want to do is go from, and I think you're saying this, go from the implied operating system, your processes, procedures, your way, WODB, your way of doing business, to making it intentional. You make it intentional by writing it down. And it doesn't need to be doesn't have to be complicated starting off, correct? Our systems always tend to get more complicated, but would you not say to keep it simple first and just to get it down?
That's a perfect way of describing it. Do you happen to have a card? Because I need a marketing guy.
I can, yeah, absolutely. I have a QR code you could scan too, which would be even more impressive.
You know what I love, Brian? So what you just said, every business has an operating system, but we do individually. And again, whether you know it or not, whether you document it or not, it doesn't matter. What we're going to talk about over the next, I don't know how many episodes, is we can actually take, sometimes I'll call it a fractal, but you can take this operating system down to your individual level, then talk to your team about it. And so when you talk about starting small, we don't want to overwhelm the company, right? So we can pilot it and say, hey, I'm going to start with the owner. I'm going to start with a senior leader, do it personally, then do it with their team, and then start to talk about how can we then cascade that through the business so that everyone's looking at it the same way. But you don't come in and do, it's the old Big Bang Theory. You come in and try to do this and change, or first document and then change the entire business, you're going to get in trouble.
It's not
and
going to work.
We're not going to do that.
And the one thing to keep in mind that we've mentioned in previous episodes is treat this as an experiment. It has to be Play-Doh that we're constantly working. That's what makes it responsive, not the piece of granite like we were talking about before. And do you watch Jack Ryan? Remember anything with Tom Clancy and Jack Ryan? He's got it's on Amazon Prime, the action show. All right. Yes. So one of his books, Tom Clancy's books, focused on Jack Ryan, and all of DC got bombed. President, vice president, all the Senate, everybody was wiped out. And he was like the 20th man down in the pecking order, right? To be president. And I'll never forget the one part of the book. I can't even remember the name of the book, but I remember what they said. And so they had to basically recreate the whole governmental system, their operating system, the financial structure, legislative, executive, the whole 9 yards. And Jack's trying to remember all this stuff. And one of the guys said to him, if it didn't get written down, it never happened.
Ooh.
If it didn't get written down, it never happened. And Jack's like, oh, so we can erase these things that we knew took place in the sense of in the financial market, but because it didn't get written down, it never technically happened. There's no record of it. And I think that has a lot to do with what you're saying about the ROS, is the fact that if we are intentional on it, we have to write it down. Just start off with something simple. It doesn't have to be something that HR would be so proud of, because most of the small businesses don't have an HR. They are the HR. So that's where I look at it with what you're saying. I'm excited about this. So go ahead, keep going.
Well, and I think the big part about this is, how do you improve something if you haven't documented what it is today, the current state? And you talked about last time, right, is what's your current state, then where do you want to get to, right? What's that future state? Without understanding your current state, how do you know if you're making improvements or not? And so there's a lot of times there's pushback on that. But I do like this idea. So Jack Ryan, I think he was he the one in The Hunt for Red October?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I watched the TV. I think I saw one season of Jack Ryan on TV. That was quite good, but I don't remember all of DC being kind of wiped out.
No, this was different. This was a Jack Ryan. It was a book. Oh, but Jack Ryan's doesn't focus on that. That part of his life doesn't focus on that. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, then back to our episode.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, well, you were talking about Hunt for Red October. Well,
yes.
Did you have a?
Yeah. Originally, yes. Yeah. But I thought the Amazon Prime, I thought that was Jack Ryan. I thought that was the.
It is. It's a different perspective on his life, or later on in his life, I believe.
Awesome.
And so yeah, I remember going to see that movie actually in the theaters. I think that was 1988. That was a long time ago.
Exactly.
That's insane. Go ahead.
It's interesting. we do our show notes, and that's about the only, really planning that we do. And you said, conversely, but don't we want to be proactive? It was sort of a playoff of responsive operating system. And the cool thing about this system is it takes care of what your business is currently doing today, right? And does it better. It stabilizes that business and then allows you to be able to respond or to do new things within the business. So by writing things down, then you can start to say what isn't working. To your point, what isn't working, and we've talked about that, and then what is working. So what are the things you want to continue to move forward? We've talked about culture. You can't impact culture directly, but by going after your operating system, which is how the business functions, how you develop strategy, how you execute strategy. When you talk about the things that are going well, those are the things that you want to continue, and you will see in the behaviors of your team. Things that aren't going as well, and we talked about that last time, right? Look at some of the things that aren't going well, some that are going well. If you look at the things that aren't going well, those are things you can go in and say, okay, how do I change my systems, right? So that I can get the behaviors I want to see, which will ultimately impact culture. So you're essentially creating systems that create the behaviors to get the kind of culture that you would like to see. And of course, this is not an overnight thing, but if you start with yourself first, and this is the interesting thing working with a past client, once the team members see a change in their leaders, and that change is coming from leaders having standard work that they do every day, specific things they need to do every day, all of a sudden the team members go, there's something going on here. There's something different happening. They're being more attentive to the work I'm doing. They're following up on what things are obstacles for me to get my work done. Oh, they called maintenance, right? This piece of equipment went down. This point of purchase system isn't working. All of a sudden, they start to feel a difference, and this can happen almost instantaneously, right?
Yes.
You start to change your behaviors at the leadership level. Your team start to see that, and they start to respond differently. You're impacting your culture, right? Because now they're seeing that.
Absolutely. So working with quite a few clients when in the past, I've seen that it never ceases to amaze me how much the team, the employees are much like my kids. I underestimate how much they, number one, care, number two, learn, and number three, how quickly they learn. So I always underestimate that. I'm like, wow, they actually do care. Number two, wow, they're learning. Oh, number three, they're learning at a quicker pace than I gave them credit for. And that's what establishes even more so the credibility of your system and then the culture of it. So it gets exciting, and then it grows legs, and then it keeps on going. So I like that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and when your leaders are focusing on processes and systems, and they're responding to the needs of the team, and that becomes more formalized, then the team, to your point, the team knows, they know what's going on in their area better than anybody. And we forget that. Sometimes we'll sit in an office and think that we can come in and make improvements. But to your point, you talk to the team and say, what's not working well? What can I do to help prevent delays or remove some obstacles? Once you get that small stuff out of the way, Brian, then they start to think bigger. Well, wait a minute. What if we started to change this around? What if we made a move here? What if we actually made a change to the way the system, the way you enter orders into the system, whatever those things are? They're the ones that should be coming up with those ideas, right?
Yeah,
not us.
And so the funny thing is, immediately when I read your notes on this, I was like, yeah, responsive, but don't we want to be proactive? You are being proactive by establishing a responsive operating system, which is like, wait, what? It's like the whole going down the rabbit hole. This doesn't make any sense. But just by virtue of the fact that you are setting up a system that can respond and move back and forth to certain situations and economic environments, internal or external for that matter, that is being proactive. So I like that. Hey, one question I had was, you mentioned on subsystems. Can we touch on that now? Is that good?
Yeah,
Or do you have a few
yeah,
other
sure.
things? So you mentioned on before off air about subsystems in your operating system. Number one, define that for us. And number two, give us a few examples of a typical subsystem.
Sure. Well, anything that I mentioned um, at the beginning around what an operating system is, right? So strategy deployment, processes, procedures. We've talked at a higher level, value streams. Those are all systems. So when you think about, we've talked about this, your business is a system. It really is a system of subsystems. So any of those things we talked about, things that have a process embedded in it, is a system. And then, of course, we have our I should say real system, but our business system, meaning the computer we're running, could be using QuickBooks, could be using an ERP system, whatever those things are. So it really is, you think about how complex a business is, even a small business, it's all these subsystems that are working together. Sometimes you'll hear in the purchasing side of the business is procure to pay. So that's, starting from the time you acquire something from a supplier all the way to it getting received into your warehouse or your store, then paying them. That's a system, right? That's procure to pay. So once you start documenting, you start to realize just how, I hate the word complexity, but how complex, but there's a lot of systems that are interacting with each other. So why is that important? Because each of those, although they seem to run autonomously, there's an impact to other parts of the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when we think about like a value stream, where you say from the time, if I'm a e-commerce business and I receive an order from a customer, have to go through credit checks, to take the credit card number, dispatch the order to the warehouse, it gets picked, packed, and shipped all the way through. Think of all the things that have to happen, in that sequence, in that process. Well, if your procurement system isn't working well, the inventory is not sitting on the shelf for you, right? If your business system isn't working well, the pricing that the customer service rep is seeing could be incorrect, or we could incorrectly invoice. So when you look all the way through what would look like a simple system, a value stream is actually being impacted by a lot of other things that are happening within the business. And so the critical part of this is not only the identifying what those subsystems are, but then start to think about how do other systems in the business impact those. And so, this comes from Dr. Deming from years and years ago. And when I talked about this to clients, or even just talking to you today about this, when you watch team members perform, and you look at how they perform, and let's say you have performance expectations, KPIs, those kinds of things. When you look at the results, I can tell you that 80 to 85% of those results, those outputs, are from the system and not from that person.
Mm.
And so most systems, reward systems, performance management systems, focus solely on the person, right? And focus solely on, anything that's happening based on where they work, that's all, and I don't want to use this term, we typically don't want to, but it's their fault.
Right.
Versus,
right.
As I just talked about, and we just talked about, you look at the subcomponents and then how they interact with each other and how complex that is, and how those need to execute almost flawlessly every day. Now you got this poor coworker that's picking an order. They're entering an order into the system. They're manufacturing something. All those individuals are being rewarded based on their performance. But think about this, that performance, 80 to 85% of that performance is based on the systems they're working within, not on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the irony of it is very similar to the irony that we talked about last week, which was all about strategy, and the fact that over 80% of small businesses have no strategy at all, no strategic plan at all. And yet 80+% of big businesses have a strategy, have a strategic plan. And yet the small businesses are the ones that need to be honed in, need to have more of a strategic plan, because there is such a small margin of error there. I mean, they're operating on a 3% net at the end of everything. And that's if they're doing really good. So one of the things, so value system, that's your manufacturer mind coming out, right? That's your systems mind. And that's what I love about. That's the method part of it. As coming from a retail perspective, I'm like, wait, what's a value system? But really, it is just the journey.
Oh, excuse me,
the
value stream. Yes.
Oh, value. Okay.
Value stream.
The value
yes.
stream. Yes. The value stream. I'm sorry. Yeah. So the value stream is actually the same as like what we would say in retail or the restaurant industry. It's your customer journey, what it takes from beginning to end, your prospect journey, your product journey. What does it take in that whole process? Your service journey. So it's just that journey from start to end, just for everybody else. That's the way I think of it. Is that correct?
It is. And if you think about it, what's really interesting is once you understand those value streams in your business, and then you talk about the customer journey. So a lot of people will use customer journey and the value stream as synonymous. But if you think about the customer journey, think about what they're trying to do. Let's say they want to buy a grill. And I think you've talked about, not being able to use your Traeger very well, making chicken.
Oh no, I used it too well.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. When you see a pitchfork come out from underneath the grill, you're like, oh shoot, it's a little too hot.
So, but I love this, Brian. And so this is what's great about having these conversations is when you start talking to people about the operating system, it becomes very obvious. And they go, oh, that's what that is. Oh, this is how that looks in my business. So once you get to know your operating system well in those value streams, if you go up a level and say, what does it look like when a customer, one of your customers is sitting at home and says, I want to buy a Weber grill? So the customer journey is what they do. And hopefully at some point they're coming into your store, contacting you and saying, hey, do you have the Weber Spirit? I forget what the numbers are. But they're going to interact. They're going to interact with your value stream. And what you want to be able to do is very quickly grab that potential client or customer, and entice them into coming in and seeing what you offer, that you've got great service, you will assemble it for them, you've got a great price, and we can get it to you, this weekend and ready for that party. The unfortunate part is if they interact with you and your systems aren't performing very well, they get a busy signal. They come into your store and there's no one there to talk to them. They're out in the patio section looking around. They see this great grill. No one talks to them. So that customer journey stops there.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
you, because now they're going down the road, or they're gonna call Amazon or jump on Amazon, whatever the case may be. So you're right. No matter what the business is, restaurant, hardware store, it doesn't matter. You all have operating systems and you all have value streams within there, and your customers are interacting with you as they go through their customer journey.
And the more our economy and the workforce becomes mobile, the more essential these systems are. If you've got 20 or less employees, your system needs to be rock solid, because you lose 2 employees or you turn over 2 employees, that's 10% of your workforce over the course of a year, which is a lot lower than industry average a lot of times. And if the system is as important as you say, which I believe it is, it has to, and it has an 80% impact versus a 20% impact as the people have. It is absolutely essential for every small business to have a rock solid operating system.
Yeah, and what I like is, I think I've mentioned this before, I used to look at the operating system, what allows you to deliver the brand. So you spend so much money on sales and marketing, getting your brand out there, getting your brand promise out there, talking about great products and services. And to your point, they hit your website and they try to do something and it doesn't work, or it takes forever to respond to that customer. So your ability to deliver that brand promise is failing you. And so understanding your operating system, documenting it, and then improving it improves every single day your ability to deliver on that brand promise.
Absolutely. You have written down here the relationship between the components of the systems are as important to attend to as the system itself. Share a little bit on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So if you look at just the process of getting let's say someone's coming in to buy a grill, you've got a Ace Hardware store, someone comes in to the front, and you at the point of purchase, you say, we're going to set up this purchase. We're going to assemble it and deliver to them, or they'll pick it up in say 3 days, right? So that all goes in the system. Now there's someone else in the back of the store or in your warehouse that needs to pull that grill off the shelf and actually do the assembly. So the relationship is, I have this great system that absolutely documents what the customer wants. I want this Spirit Weber grill. I want it delivered to me in 3 days. Here's the price. You may or may not throw in assembly. Let's say it's free assembly. All that's in there. But that document gets printed off in your warehouse or in the back of the store, and it gets lost. So now that whole thing just stopped, right? So your system is stopping, and now it's a handoff. And this is typically where it happens. It's a handoff between one process with another process, or one team to another team. And that relationship's critical. So when that's done well, you will meet or exceed the customer's expectations, right? They get it delivered on time. They're having a big party, comes on Thursday. They're having a big party for the weekend. They can fire it up, burn off all the stuff on it, get everything ready to go. Or they come and it's now Thursday. Oh, our system isn't smart enough to say we should call them and tell them that we had a problem, or we just forgot about it. It just went into our dark, black hole. So the handoffs are what's critical, and that's this idea of the relationship between the subsystems. And so
Right.
they could do the best job ever. They put together these grills so fast, and they're perfect every time. But it doesn't matter if you didn't find the order to actually do it, or you found it late and you deliver late. So two different teams, both executing flawlessly, but that connection between the two was, we dropped the ball because that document or that signal to say, hey, we need to get this thing pulled off the shelf, we need to assemble it, and it need to get delivered, that fell apart. And usually that's where you see the biggest opportunities in a business, is the gaps between those processes, where things are falling down. Or it's the old telephone game. Well, I thought you said it was Thursday. I hand wrote it, put it down there. When I saw THUR, I thought that was Tuesday of next week.
Yeah.
I didn't see Thursday.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of examples, very simple examples, but those are the things that can happen. But the teams say, hey, we did exactly what we're supposed to do. We did it flawlessly, right? Everything worked.
And the one thing that I see with this is, because we have a lot of small business owners that can take this personally. They're listening to this. And the fact is, I look at it this way: as two emotions, two personalities need to be prevalent with the small business owner for this to work. Number one is humility. You have to be willing to be humble enough to say, the system that I have right now, it's a little bit flawed. I need to be willing to improve it. Okay, what is wrong? I have to be willing to look. You have to be a little bit thick-skinned to do this, right? Because you're looking for mistakes. And number two is, you have to be passionate. You have to have a passion for excellence and wanting to make it better. Okay, I am so passionate about the end result, the end product that I want to create, that I'm willing to go through some of this muck and mud to say, oh, wow, this kind of hurts. This kind of stings, because what I've done, it isn't really working. And that humility and passion together is really what I see as like small business owners who really want to put this in place and have it get traction, which it can and it should, and it's essential. That's what they need to be thinking. Hey, check your pride at the door. We're here to improve. We're passionate about giving these people a great product, a great service, and helping our community. So that's the way I look at it on the back end, and a little bit more of the emotional side of what goes on in a business owner's mind.
Agreed. And then if you do that, then what they'll see is when you identify those opportunities for improvement, again, if we go back to if 85% of the results are coming from the system, blame the system.
Yeah.
Fix the system, right? So
Yes.
it's not about the people.
Yes,
right?
It is not, which makes it incredibly much more responsive and able to improve much quicker. Because guess what? If you're pointing the finger at the system, that system will never point a finger back. But if you're pointing a finger at the people, that finger is going to come right back at you and at other people. And then pretty soon, yeah, you got a big
Right.
problem.
And again, if you point the finger at the people, in our example about the grill, both teams did everything the way they were supposed to. But when that order dropped into the warehouse or the back of the store, it fell down behind the printer or something. And here's the cool thing. Once you say, okay, hey, what broke in the system? Then you can say, well, okay, let's document that. So here's the one thing we're document. From the time the customer places the order at the point of purchase until we print off that document, what does that look like? There's a start of documenting your system. Then it's like, okay, from the back end, then from the time I get that pick document to executing either a delivery or it's prepped for an in-store pickup, what does that look like? What happened? Well, it broke down between those two processes. So how do we make sure that doesn't happen again?
Mhm.
That's what you're going to look at. So it isn't the process itself that was flawed or the people, it was that handoff between those two pieces of the entire value stream. And then it becomes fun. Back to experimenting. Well, let's try this. Let's make sure that, one, that printer doesn't have a place to draw paper other than right where it's supposed to be. Or they don't print it until they're ready to go. So they walk over and they actually print the document instead of having it printed automatically. And then you can just write down, that's the way we want the process to work. Your hypothesis is that we won't lose orders by doing it this way. Let's try it. Let's run it. Let's experiment. And so the whole idea around this and why the responsiveness is whenever we're making changes to any of the subsystems or components of the system, we have a hypothesis that if we make this change, this is what will happen. And then we execute. And we can go back and say, did what we expect to have happen? If it did, then yes, that's the way we're going to do it from now on. Or, we thought that would be the best way to do it. That's not working as good. Okay, well, how else could we do it? Now you've got a team of problem solvers, and they're constantly looking for things that aren't going the way they should, and they're starting to think about those. And the great thing is, you're going to have no shortage of opportunities to fix things, because especially the ones that creep up more and more and more, that creep up more often.
That's great. That's great. And the more you get doing that and problem solving it, the better, number one, the better you become at it. And number two, the more addicted you become to improvement.
100%,
You get better
100%.
at it, and then you find, wow, I am better at it. And you naturally want to do that more. So it's a great, great cycle. So this is good. Anything else before we sign off here?
Well, that excitement gets you to that increased engagement, right? And we talked about every episode, we've talked about engagement.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to talk about is, and I threw this down, is what about AI? So if you do a good job of documenting your operating system, the components of your operating system, if you do a good job of starting to experiment and change things that are happening in the operating system, you have a way better foundation than to come in with AI and say, okay, now how can I apply AI on top of it? You always talk about paving the goat path. If you bring AI on top of a system that's not well documented, and you're just going to grab something and say, oh, here's the latest thing that we should do. Remember that talked about that order dropping, in between. Got exactly what the customer requirements are. I can execute flawlessly in the back. Let's just do that even faster. So let's have
So,
even more and more issues because that system is not working the way it should, but we're using automation on top of it.
so give me one or two steps that the listener can take away to just get the ball rolling with creating a responsive operating system.
Yep. Yeah, I think first is go back and listen to our last episode on the SOS. And part of that is what is your strategy? What are where are the areas that you're trying to improve your business? So to your point then, Brian, take a look at that area. Let's document that area. Let's document the processes that are in place, any potential system interactions that you may have, systems meaning a business system. Document all that first, then apply that change that you were talking about. So in a smaller operation, you may say, hey, I got a fire, I'm going to fix it now, then go back and document. Great. But your separate part of optimization is let's document that, the area that we're going to work on, document the experiments that we're going to run on top of that, and then let's run the business and see how those experiments play out. So I think that's number one. Another one is, what do you expect from your leaders? Your leaders have to, so this is really a thinking system. Your leaders have to think differently. And a big part of that is they need to understand that the results that they're seeing from their team, the majority of those results are coming from the system and not the team. So your leaders understand that. So number one is let's start documenting where we're making improvements. Number two, let's make sure our leaders understand that the results that they're seeing are coming from the system. So as we go forward, let's make sure that when we see an error, a quality issue, feedback from a customer that's not happy, let's take a step back and look at it and go, what happened within the system, that caused that to happen. So now you've got this great feedback loop. And to your point, a great quality system is customers complaining to you because they're telling you something didn't go right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But let's look at
that type of quick feedback is fantastic, which is what you want in order to be responsive. You need that instant feedback. You can't wait 90 days for that quarterly review and things like that. Not to be responsive. No, you have to be ready to go. So I like it. Yeah.
And then I think the third piece is then what kind of results are you getting? So what basic KPIs do you have in place? Because what you want to be able to show is that over time, I think you talked about what are some of the basic retail metrics that you look at, Brian, in a retail operation.
I mean, with any of it, it's average ticket sale, it's number of customers through the door, things like that, GPM, gross profit margin, those areas. Yeah, those are some of the most basic, right? Then you get into inventory turnover, things like that. But those are all things that just need to be constantly measured and kept an eye on. However, you do not take them like the giant abominable snowman would do with Bugs Bunny. Oh, I'm gonna love him and care for him and just I will never let him go. They're numbers. Do not treat them like Bugs Bunny, okay?
Right.
They are meant to be gone after as a starting point, as a diving board, and jump right into like what you're saying, responsive. Being responsive, being like, okay, how are we going to respond to this?
Right.
How are we going to change a system? It's not just about firing a person. It could be, but probably more likely than not, that system has created that person to act that way and respond that way. So,
right. So those KPIs then should show, if you dive them, those will start showing that those improvements you're making are having an impact. So your gut tells you they are, but you're going to start to see those showing up. So we're going to document those processes. We're going to make sure our leaders understand that we should focus on improving the system. It's not about the people. And then 3 is like, how do we measure those improvements longer term, right? And if we use those right metrics or KPIs, that'll start to show up in those numbers for them. Then and again, you start to see a better engagement. Your leaders are attending to what's happening with the team. The team members see that support, their engagement starts going up. You got this great feedback cycle that's going on. Yeah. So I think there's three takeaways. 3 takeaways, Brian, from today.
That's great.
1, talked about the operating system. That's what formally connects the components or the subsystems in the business. So we talked about systems. Now we take a step back and say there's this thing called an operating system that connects all those pieces. Two, the relationship between the components are as important as the components themselves. I hope that that little story around buying a grill in a hardware store kind of makes it visible what can happen, even though you have two very strong systems that are working. What happened between them failed your customer, and ultimately it's a fail for you because you potentially may have lost the sale. And then the third one, I love this quote from Stafford Beer. The purpose of a system is what it does. So it doesn't matter what you intended to do. The purpose of the system is what it does today. By developing a responsive operating system, you can start to change that system, the way it works, be intentional about doing those experiments as we talked about, and then the purpose of the system is now changing to the intent that you have. So there could be a huge gap between the two. We're saying we can close that gap, modify the system intentionally, formally, improve it so that it gets closer and closer to what you intend it to be versus just what it's doing today. And a lot of us know that sometimes you look at what's happening in the day and go, how did we get here, right? How do we get to this point where we have so many issues? We can turn that around, Brian, right? But it's going to be, we're going to start small. We're going to start with a small part of the team. We're going to look at the old 80-20. Where's the area that we can get the most leverage from in terms of making improvements, and then go from there. As we go forward, then Brian, we'll talk about specific tools and or subsystems that we're going to talk about improving.
Yeah, love it. Love it. That's great. That's good stuff. Thank you, Mike. This is fantastic. So, and then next week we're going to take, we've been diving so deep mentally into things, so at least I have, and, I've been rubbing my head bald practically, knocking it against the wall. So now we're going to take a step back and have something a little more, front end, customer facing, a little more fun, and we're going to go into the marketing and branding aspect, and this is something we both have some good experience with, and it should be a good fun time, so look forward to that.